knees are bothering me. Not that that means anything to anybody, but wait till you get to the oil, you'll see what this means. So, I guess I introduce you first. Well, would you introduce her, please? John's right here. We have this whole thing scheduled with plans. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, and Julie said we're the Hyde Park players, and the four of us, it was supposed to be six of us, but two of them couldn't make it tonight. But, up first is going to be one of our all-time favorites, Joan Tulolinski.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but I don't have a personality to play tonight. So I'm going to read some poetry, and I hope that's all right with you. It's not, it's historical times that I'm going to read. Now, let me get going here. Is it this way? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can shout it now. I'm going to read a poem by John Greenleaf Whittier. And he was born in 1807 on a farm near Herfield, Massachusetts. He felt a strong kinship throughout his life with the hard-working rural poor. And he was a crusader for humanitarian causes. His Quaker faith dictated his courageous battle against slavery. And he was inspired by the poet Robert Burns. He has a long list of ballads and poems and about 100 hymns. And one of the best known hymns is Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. Now I will read a short poem titled Barbara Fragile. Up from the meadows rich with corn, clear on a cool September morn, the clustered spires of Frederick stand, green-walled by the hills of Maryland. Round about them, orchards sweep, apple and peach trees fruited deep, fair as the garden of the Lord to the eyes of the rebel horde. On the pleasant morn of the early fall, when Lee marched over the mountain wall, over the mountain winding down, horse and foot, into Fredericktown. 40 flags with their silver stars, 40 flags with their crimson bars, flapped in the morning wind. The sun looked down and saw not the wrong. Up rose Barbara Fragile then, bowed with her 44 years and 10. Bravest of all in Fredericktown, she took up the flag the men hauled down. In her attic window the staff she set, to show that one heart was loyal yet. Up the street came the rebel tread, Stonewall Jackson riding ahead. Under his slouched hat, left and right he glanced, the old flag met his side. Halt! The dust-brown ram stood fast. Fire outblazed the rifle blast. It shivered the window, pane and sash. It rent the banner with seam and gash. And quick as it fell from that windowsill, quick as it fell from the broken staff, Dame Barbara snatched up the silken scarf. She leaned far out of the windowsill and shook it forth with a royal will. Shoot if you must this dear old grey head, but spare your country's flag, she said. A shade of sadness and a look of shame over the face of the leader came. The nobler nature within him stirred to neither that woman's deed and word. Who touches a hair of yon grey head dies like a dog, march on! All day long through Frederick Street sounded the sound of marching feet, and all day long that free flag tossed over the heads of the rebel host. torn thorns rose and fell on the loyal winds that loved it well. And through the hill-back sunset light shone over it with a warm good night. Barbarous Brighties work his oar, and the rebel rides on his grave no more. Honour to her, and let a tear fall, for her sake on stone walls bear. Over barbarous Brighties' grave, flag of freedom and union wave. Peace and order and beauty draw round thy symbol of light and law. And ever the stars above look down on thy stars below in Fredericktown. Now here is a poem by a local man, a Scranton. George Bowen was born in Scranton in 1867. And he had very little formal education. And he went into the mines at 10-year-old as a trapper boy. And finally he worked himself up to be a section mine leader. In his spare time, he learned to be self-taught, as you might say. He read Shakespeare, he read different poets, theology, and the classics. And finally, at about age of 60, when he retired with coal miner's asthma, he put together a book, and it was called Diamond of the Mines. And he dedicated the book to his very best friend, Dr. Thomas Ruddock, who was the grandfather of our present Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And this is one of the poems. Oh, hills of dear Scranton, they're wild and they're free, and dear are their forest-crowned bosoms to me. Oh, heart-thrilling moment, what rapture is mine, as I marvel and muse on their wonders divine. On the highest peaks in the sun's rich glow, I stand and behold the great city below. Its breakers, its mansions, its steeples arise, majestic with splendor, to the snow-clouded skies. The brown silent forests that creep to the brow, where the sumac, the pine, and the giant elms grow, where the white-blossomed laurel its glory displays, and the delicate daisy her jewels arrays. From the depths of the woodland, so tuneful and clear, a world of sweet music ascends to my ear. I bend for to listen from their temple abode. The birds are all singing their anthems to God. The bluebird is piping his love note divine, his mate fondly listening, is perched on the pine. And the robin's rich music resounds through the down as he sings to his love-mate his evening farewell. Like jewels that glitter with beauty serene, Chinchilla, Clark Summit, and Dalton are seen, and farther away like a beautiful rose, the village of Waverley gorgeously glows. And northward, wrapped deep with its rich purple veil, reposing in splendor, lies sweet Carbondale, with German and Jessup and Olive and Deer, with Peckville and Priceburg and Blakely all near. O hills of dear Scranton, thy tall peaks outspread, the home of my living, the graves of my dead. Wherever I wander, wherever I'll be, my heart turns untrammeled to Scranton and thee. I ask only this, when life's journey will end, nothing more than a warm tear of a friend, a green shady spot, just a place for to rest, midst the hills of dear Scranton, the place I love best.
Is he buried around here?
That I don't know. I would have to look up.
Sounds like he wanted to be.
I'm sure he would, yes. I think the book was published around 1928 or something like that. But actually when he died, I don't know. But there was a very nice clipping about him in the Scranton Times about 2 years ago. And it was a constable that had found the diamond in the mines book in his attic when he was clearing out his grandfather's, after his grandfather passed away, and he found the diamond. So after that, I really don't know.
My name is Daniel Carey. I was asked to come here to speak to you tonight about my life, my civilian life, and my military, and back into civilian life once again. I was born in 1839 in the town of Pottsville, Pittston. My mother was from around the area, and family grew up in the William Valley. My father, at the age of 2, at my age of 2, passed on. When I was 6 years old, I attended school at Williams School in the town. At the age of 9 years, I retired from school and got a job at Mr. Thomas's wagon repair shop in the stable, as a stable hand, cleaning the stable, taking care of the horses, even though they were much, much taller than I was. But I learned how to control them. Mr. Thomas said, Daniel, get the mule, get him now. And Mr. Thomas, he's a lot bigger than me. Don't let him intimidate you there, Daniel, he says. Get the mule and take care of him. And I would get the mule in my little hand, and I'll be pulling the mule. And if he jerked, he'd be flying me around. And I finally got him to the stable. And then I had to go into the next stable and take the other one out and clean the stable out. And I would do that for 3 years. Then Mr. Thomas says, Daniel, you're going to learn another trade. I'm going to teach you how to repair wagons. And I did that for a month or 3 years. At the age of 15, I was helping Mr. Thomas repair wagons. And he said to me one day, Daniel, you're getting just about as good as I am fixing these wagons. I said, well, thank you, Mr. Thomas. I really appreciate that. He said, but you know what, Daniel, we have to find you a young woman. You spend too much time in the stable with the mules. So I did find a beautiful woman. Her name was Elizabeth. Elizabeth was my second cousin. I knew her all my life. But we started cooking, and not too long after that, we got married. And that was 1857. But I remember not too long after my marriage, Mr. Thomas was growing ill from his age, and he had me take care mostly of repairing the wagons at the stable, like running the show all by myself. And I remember Mrs. Shea one time, she brought an old mule in for a little payment to Mr. Thomas because I see her husband accidentally drowned in the river. And she really didn't have much means to get her wagon fixed, but she got it fixed by Mr. Thomas, and she brought the mule, and Mr. Thomas looked at the old mule, and he looked at me and he goes, Daniel, he says, bring the old mule into the barn and check it out and see what kind of price you can get. So I brought the old mule in, and the old mule's name was kind of funny. His name was Buck. So me and Buck went into the barn, and we put him in one of the stables, and I was checking out his hoofs, and he came up with a right hoof and hit me square in the jaw, breaking out 2 of my teeth. But not want to be outdone by the old Buck. I went over to the corner and I got an old pickaxe, and I went over there and I got it and I whacked him in the mouth. I knocked out 3 of his best teeth. It must have been quite a sight to see us coming out of the barn. Mrs. Shea and Mr. Thomas talking, and both our mouths were all bloody. But you know what? I said to Mr. Thomas, I says, I kind of taking liking to the old buck here. Give Mrs. Thomas about $2 for the old buck. And take it out of my pay, Mr. Thomas. And the old buck, not even 2 weeks later, he dropped dead. Well, anyway, I remember old buck because my teeth were missing. Every time I smile in the mirror, I'm the old buck. But anyway, in 1861, the Confederates attacked one of our forts down in South Carolina. President Lincoln called for 750,000 3-1 volunteers. I was going to join up with my brother Elijah, much younger than I. Said, Daniel, wait until December when I turn 17 and I'll get a certificate from Mom so I can join with you. I said, okay, Elijah, I'm really ready to stay home with Mom. Go, Daniel, I want to go with you. I want to see the world. Okay, Daniel. So come December, we got the Providence. And we signed up at the enlistment station there. And they told me and Daniel, on or before January 3rd of '62, report to Camp Luzerne, right there outside of Wilkesboro. And report for duty. You will see Colonel Sullivan. He will tell you. Well, that was on December 15th. So I get to spend the holidays with my wife, because now I have 2 girls, Elizabeth and Christina. Christina really gets to be a baby. Elizabeth wasn't too happy for me signing up. I told her something that has to be done. I said, wherever there was a fight, there was a carry. And I have to go. But she says, Daniel, you're bringing Elijah with you. He's only a young boy at 17. I said, but he wants to go with me. I cannot. I'll make a promise. When I went to the station to sign up, I said to the man, if my brother being underage or 18, but he has a certificate from my mother, is there any way that he can stay with me so I can keep an eye on him? The recruiting officers, I'll have to send a note to you to Colonel Sullivan at Camp Luzerne, and it'll have to be up to him. January 2nd came, me and Elijah, we got down to Camp Luzerne. My goodness, it was bigger than I ever imagined, and there were soldiers everywhere. And I was trying to ask a couple as they were going by, what can I find, anybody, so there was a big sign that says, Colonel Sullivan. They must have missed that sign. So me and Daniel walked over there, and they told us, boys, go into that thing there and they'll suit you up. So we went into this room and they gave us my coat for that. Elijah was so excited. I was getting a little bit nervous. But they said to me to Elijah that we'll only be at Camp Luzerne for about 2 weeks. Then we'll be transferred by car down to Harrisburg, the military camp down there, Camp Curtin. And then we'll be put in an outfit down there. Colonel Sullivan, he was a very nice man. I think he taken a liking to me and Elijah. But anyway, we got down to Camp Curtin. And there was a new regiment forming. It was called the 56th Pennsylvania. And we were put with the last company, Company K. There we'll stay. For a while. Now we're reunion soldiers. It was March. Same month this month. March 11th. We're fully trained, getting ready to move out. We only had 8 companies. That's all we can muster at Camp Curtin. 864 men, officers and enlisted men. They came to me on March 11th, they said, Private Carey, we understand you can drive a team and we fix a wagon if it breaks down. I said, yes sir, I can. Would you be interested in being a regimental wagoneer? Driving one of 3 of the regimental wagons. I said, well sure. They said, we'll give you extra pay. We'll give you $1 more. I said, well, I'll take it. I mean, that'll be a total of $12 that month. So I took it. On March 22nd, our regiment moved out of Harrisburg. We got down our first fight. I'll never forget it. Boy, did we run. Not just us. Everybody ran. You see, it was the second battle of Bull Run. And as the first, we ran too. And I remember there was this Marine. As we were going back to Washington, there was Marines on the corner there, and they're laughing at us. And one of the officers says, what are you talking about, he says to the Marine. He said, the first battle, you guys beat us back to Washington. So after the second battle of Bull Run, the 56 was it, at every major battle. I remember July 1st, 1863. We were camped just over the border from Pennsylvania in a creek called Hyde Creek. And that morning, a rider came in and the whole camp was in disarray. And they said, the first corps, get up and start marching up Donneberg's Road. There's a fight up in a little town called Gettysburg. Well, they took me off the wagon and they filled me back in with my musket and everything. I got back into the ranks in the file and they marched to Gettysburg. There we seen Buford's cavalry engaged with the enemy just west of town. And we got into a little fight with them, but we got overcome and we had to run back through the town of Gettysburg. And we got to a little thing called Colts Hill. When I got to Colts Hill, I had a pain in my chest that was terrible. Some of my friends were saying that I'm having a heart attack because I was so scared. Well, I said, I'm not the only one scared. You all ran just as fast as I did. The pain in my chest was horrible. I couldn't hardly breathe. The second day of Gettysburg came, not much happened. But that night, I called Hill. All hell broke loose. There was a fight like I never seen. And it was at nighttime, and the fires from the muskets were going out. You couldn't tell friend from foe. But I was loading my musket as fast as I can and shooting. And still, the pain in my chest was just overwhelming. I just had to stop and just lay on my back and try to take deep breaths. Finally, the Johnnies, they finally just withdrew and everything started to be calm. The third day, we got notified that we have to go protect our cannons. So the 56 marched out to surround our cannons just in case they're captured, because somebody had at least going to make another attack. So we got to protect our cannons. I went there, but I had to stop. I had to lay on the road. And my other members just left me laying on the road. And I remember Colonel Merritt, he came up and he says, Private, are you okay? I said, I'm having this trouble breathing, the pains of my chest. He said, the medical corps is up now. He goes, why don't you go to the medical tent, the 1st Corps Army tent, medical tent, and have them check you out, see what's going on. So I got there, and I met the head surgeon, and his name was Murray, and he asked me, what seems to be the problem there, Private? And I said, I'm getting terrible pains on my chest. He said, well, maybe you're having a heart attack. I said, well, it don't feel like a heart attack. It's just that I just can't breathe. So he checked me out a little bit, and he gave me 1 teaspoon of mercury to take and a little bit of maple syrup to chase it down. And he sent me back into the ranks. On the 3rd day, covering the cannons, there was a big fight. Now they would call it charge. We didn't do too much, just stood around the cannons, watched the cannons shoot out, and finally the cannons withdrew, and that's when the biggest fight happened. Well, we didn't see it because we're down over the ridge. But we heard it all, and it wasn't pleasant. A lot of screaming and yelling. When we came back, after everything calmed down, we came back over the ridge, and it was a slaughter pit. It really, really was. It was dead Johnny's everywhere. Some marbles in there. But that pain in my chest, it's still there. It didn't happen. So I had to go back to the medical tent. They kept me there. I was there for 2 weeks. And they said they kept me in observation to make sure I'm not going to die in the field. Because a lot of men were dying of heat exhaustion. Some were dying of heart attacks. But mine was not a heart attack, the surgeon or the doctor said. I don't know what it is, but he goes, I'll tell you what, I'll give you another ounce of mercury, and I'll send you on your way. And that's all I can do for you, brother. So off I went, and I went caught up with my members of the 56th and the 1st Corps down at the Potomac River. Just then, Lee and his army were just crossing it. And not much of a fight happened there. And that was it. After Gettysburg, the 1st Army Corps was totally annihilated. And so it was up to General Lee to make a new army, to reorganize the army. The 56th got put with the 5th Army Corps. And there we would stay for the remainder of the war. And in 1864, the winter of 1864, Elijah and our enlistment ran out. We were down in Culpeper, Virginia. And we were told that this new general by the name of Grant, was taking over the army. And he's all fight. He's all fight. So we decided that we're going to re-enlist him. And which we did. And we got almost 900 hours. We got a couple hundred hours from the state as a bounty, a couple hundred hours from the county, and a couple hundred hours from the organization, YMCA and stuff. We had almost 900 hours. And I got a 30-day furlough. But I couldn't get back to my beloved Elizabeth because I would never make it back in time, not the way things were all volatile. So I stayed down. And I was put back into the ranks in the final of 56 as an infantryman. When we marched out of Culpeper, we crossed the Rapidan River into the wilderness. There, a fight like I never ever seen before. It was brutal. But then again, from that marching, the pains of my chest again started acting up. And I had to go see a surgeon and get a certificate to get out of the infantry, and they put me back. They put me with the ambulance corps. I was an ambulance driver. Imagine that. Going from a regimental wagoneer to an ambulance driver. And there I would stay until the end of my service. June of 1865, the 56th was disbanded in Philadelphia. And I came home to my beloved Elizabeth, my daughter Elizabeth, and Christina. Mr. Thomas passed on. I was in military service, and the wagon shop was just closed up. I couldn't do it anyway because the littlest labor that I would do, I would get a terrible pain in my chest. So I got a job as a night watchman at the Pennsylvania Railroad in Costco. And one night, I was at an all-night shift. I was walking my rounds on the railroad, and I got that terrible pains in my chest. And I went to my knees, and that's all I remember. My life at that time was over. I was 29 years old. My wife wife Elizabeth, she petitioned the state because she said that my death was caused from my military service. So an autopsy was performed on my body in Wilkes-Barre, and it was proven that I had all fluid around my lungs because of at that Gettysburg battle. I had fluid building in my lungs, and the surgeon never did. He gave me mercury to take, and that fluid was building and building and building. And in 1869, at the age of 29, I died of a massive heart attack, right directly from military service. Now that I'm in heaven, everybody says to me, Daniel, why are you dressed in your military uniform? You can dress any way you want. You can live your whole life here. And I said, I'm wearing this because I'm wearing it because it was the happiest day of my life. I'm going home.
I'll top that. All right, good evening.
Hi.
Good evening. It's very good for you to be back in these parts. See, I know a lot about this area. I spent a lot of time traveling around this area, visiting patients. See, but a lot of things have changed since I first came around here all those years ago. You see, we were coming up here, we saw this anchor in the middle of the road. What's all that about? That wasn't there the last time I came through. Well, I'm Dr. Horace Hollister, and I spent many years in this valley attending to the needs of all the people in this area. See, I took over for Dr. Benjamin Troop. He moved his practice up to Carbondale. Now, in those days, there weren't a lot of doctors around, so I did rather well in the field of medicine. And I had a very keen interest in history, too. Local history, that is. See, I had a penchant for collecting Indian artifacts, Indian relics. And well, you know, the Indians, they were here long before we were. So I collected thousands and thousands of Indian relics. Well, see, not only did I have weapons, I had pottery. As a matter of fact, I even found a cut stone bird right in Dr. Benjamin Troop's backyard. Well, I used to exhibit all of my relics in my doctor's offices, and there was none better. Well, I guess there was one gentleman down the line named Steuben Jenkins. He thought his collection was a lot better than mine. But, well, we went around and around about that for many, many years. Finally, they put both of our collections right next to each other. And they had people come and judge the collections. Well, they judged them all to be equally wonderful. Well, I don't believe that. I still think mine is better. In later years, I wrote mostly history. And matter of fact, has anybody ever heard of Hollister's History of Lackawanna County, Lackawanna Valley? I wrote that. And it was a history of the early days in this area. Now, before I let you go, I'm much shorter than my friend here. Before I let you go, I've been noticing that many of you look peaked and pale. I've got something for you right here. Dr. Hollister's bilious pills. They're sugar-coated, and they're great for a bad stomach or a headache. And they're the best thing on earth for efficiency. And I've noticed a couple of you coughing back here. What you need is Dr. Hollister's cough syrup. It's made from herbs, my own special formula. Yeah, it's If you want to get cured, you have to take it daily. I've been taking it every day for 30 years. Fix you right up. Now before you leave, what? Now before you leave, I want you to come by and I'll give you something to cure what ails you. Now I've got in 25 cents, 50 cents, and this is my personal favorite. I'll give you the big bottle for $1. Well, thank you, folks. It's been nice seeing you. Meet me in the back. I'll sell you some stuff. Have a good time.
I'll drink to that.
Good evening. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lydia Linscott, and unlike the others you've met here this evening, I'm not from this area. In fact, I've come a very long way to tell you my story this evening. I'm from Maine, and it's there that I was born, the daughter of Captain. It's there that I was born. My mother was Irene Bradford Rose, and my father was Captain Moses Rose. My mother was directly descended from William Bradford, a signer of the Mayflower Compact. Because of her family's stature, it was expected that my mother would marry well, and that she did. Now you folks, not being from Maine, Aroostook County, Presque Isle, wouldn't know it, but the Hayden family, the family of my father, Granville, was quite prominent and well off. And sometimes I think the Haydens were in the Presque Isle area even before the land itself. They were very early settlers, and like I said, very well off, farmers and merchants. My father, Granville, was very well liked. He was very prominent in the community. Not only was he a farmer, but he owned a mercantile. He had many, many friends. And when it came time for a deputy sheriff to be appointed to Presque Isle, Maine, my father received that position. Now, Aroostook County did have a sheriff, but he covered many, many, many miles. He was also 93 years old. So he had deputies throughout the area. And in Presque Isle, Maine, my father was the law. We didn't have a lot of crime there. Living up north in land like that, it's not an easy life. You learn to get along with your neighbors. We did have trouble from time to time with a Canadian who would come over the border looking for work, Jim Cullen. Big Jim Cullen. Mr. Cullen was well over 6 foot tall and over 250 pounds. And he would come into our area looking for work as a logger or making shingles. Mr. Cullen did as he pleased because he could get away with it. No one wanted to tangle with Mr. Cullen. Other merchants in town noticed that whenever Mr. Cullen had been in their store, things would be missing. They let it go. Again, no one wanted to bother Mr. Cullen. Until finally, at the end of April 1873, Mr. Cullen broke into a store and took a pair of boots. Everyone in town was certain that Mr. Cullen took those boots. He was the only man in the area that they would fit. They were quite sizable in size. Naturally, my father was sent for, and he agreed. This time, Mr. Cullen had definitely gone too far. So, he deputized another man, a William Hubbard. And I must tell you something. If you're going to commit crime, you don't want to do it when there's snow on the ground. It leaves tracks. And Mr. Cullen left a clear map of his escape route. And my father and Mr. Hubbard followed. They found Mr. Cullen at the shingle shaving camp of John Swanbach. Mr. Swanbach was there with another worker, Minot Bird. When my father and Mr. Hubbard got to the camp, Mr. Cullen admitted that he had taken the boots. My father had planned to take him back to town peaceable life the next morning. Actually, most people believe that my father had hoped that during the night, Mr. Cullen would leave and go back to Canada, and the area would be rid of him for good. What happened the next morning? Well, there was nothing peaceable about it. Mr. Swanbach and Mr. Bird awoke to see Mr. Cullen murdering my father and Mr. Hubbard with an axe. He was so engaged and so enraged that he never saw the two men leave the camp and run for their lives. They went back to town, and of course, they told the men of the town what had happened. A group of men assembled and went out to find Mr. Cullen. My Uncle Cyrus went and retrieved a coffin to get the remains of my father. The men who had set out to find Mr. Cullen did find him at the home of the woman he lived with. And she might not have been the smartest woman, but when she found out what Mr. Cullen did, she was smart enough to point his hiding spot out right quick. And Mr. Cullen was taken back to town from jail. My Uncle Cyrus did find the remains of my father, but he needed to retrieve a smaller box. After Mr. Bird and Mr. Swanbach ran for their lives, Mr. Cullen stacked the pieces of my father and Mr. Hubbard like firewood and set them ablaze. The only thing that was left of both men were some charred pieces of bone, keys, and some buttons. My Uncle Cyrus brought the remains in a small box into the jail and showed them to Mr. Cullen. And Mr. Cullen's remark was that my father was looking quite well. He also said he wished that he had killed Mr. Bird and Mr. Swanbach, and that was his only regret. Mr. Cullen had no remorse for what he had done. But of course, he didn't really have a lot of time to think about what he had done. That evening, the men of the town assembled with hoods over their heads or kerchiefs over their mouths, or not speaking so their voices couldn't be recognized. And they forcibly removed Mr. Cullen from the jail. And when they got him outside, they hung him from the highest tree. It was the only lynching in Maine history. Mr. Cullen, being a big man, did not die fast. The men in the town thought he was dead, and under protest got the local doctor to come and investigate, and it was determined after Mr. Cullen was cut down that he was not dead. So he was strung up again. This time there was no mistaking when he was cut down that he was indeed dead. My mother buried my father in Fairmount Cemetery. It always bothered my mother knowing that my father was not resting in his grave alone, and that Mr. Hubbard was not in his grave alone. My mother never got over it. My father's funeral was quite sizable. He was very well respected. He was a member of the Masonic fraternity. Mr. Cullen did not receive a funeral. His body was put on display in the back of a local store, and everyone in the town came and had a look. And some women even stuck pins in it. After the viewing at the store, his body was put in the box that my Uncle Cyrus originally obtained for my father's remains. And Mr. Cullen was buried, but not in a cemetery. His body was taken out to the town dump. At the time of his burial, the ground was very hard. It was the end of April. In the summer, Mr. Cullen would be resting in a swamp. The ground got very soft. Mr. Cullen did not rest in peace. That fall, a Professor Bateman came into Presque Isle. Professor Bateman was a phrenologist. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the science of phrenology, it involves reading the bumps on a person's head to determine their character or their future, what kind of life they would have. Professor Bateman had heard of Big Jim Cullen's stature and size, and thought that his skull would be the perfect skull to use in his demonstrations. So he came into Presque Isle, and he asked the city officials if he could go out to the swamp and retrieve Mr. Cullen's skull. And even though Mr. Cullen was a murderer, none of the officials wanted any part of disturbing the grave. But with enough alcohol and enough money, Professor Bateman did find someone to help him. And under cover of night, the two men went out, exhumed Mr. Cullen's body from the swamp, removed his head from his body, and boiled it until the skin was gone. And Professor Bateman took the skull and was never heard from again. Like I said, my mother never recovered from these events. I was born 6 weeks after the murder of my father. My mother received $100 a year for the care of me and my brother, Elsa. And then she joined my father in Fairmount Cemetery 11 years later. As for me, I went on and married a wonderful Mr. Russell. Unfortunately, he passed away. I didn't expect that I would be married, but I did. To a man who I would be willing to bet we don't have many of in the profession in this area. I married Austin Linscott, Captain Austin Linscott. He was a master mariner, a sea captain, and we had a son, Austin Linscott Jr. And as for the Haydens, they are all still in Maine, and Florida, and New Mexico, and Texas, and they are right here in Lackawanna County. This story, while it has its oddball, scary, creepy twists and turns, is the story of my Megan, because her great-great-great-great-grandfather is Granville Hayden, the man who was murdered. This is Granville, and this is Irene. And the reason I did this story tonight is, as a genealogist, I'm sure all of you know, that sometimes you look into your family tree and you find things that you really don't expect to find. And when this story came to me from my daughter's great-grandmother, who I love dearly, Marilla, I couldn't believe it. It came in this article, because she's from Maine. I have pictures of her on Granville's grave, and it's like a big to-do. She sent me this whole newspaper clipping. This is the Hayden family plot in Maine. I've got a million pictures of that at home. It's a big deal in Maine. The Haydens are still there. One went on to be state representative. They were a very, very prominent family. The whole Granville Hayden incident is something that surfaces up there from time to time when they have their heritage days and things like that. I was appalled to find out that they have Jim Cullen look-alike contests. You know, you'd think they'd have a Granville Hayden look-alike contest, not a Jim Cullen look-alike contest, but they do. They have a Jim Cullen look-alike contest. This story, for those of you who, I don't know if any of you are Stephen King readers. If you are, you know that Mr. King is from Bangor, Maine. And I am certain very, very familiar with this story because a slightly modified version of it turns up in his book, It. And that's why I think this story, you don't know, it's like Forrest Gump says, you know, you look in your family, it's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. And not only did I find this for Megan, she's got she's a Mayflower descendant. She's got Revolutionary War ancestors, Civil War ancestors. She's got a police officer killed in the line of duty. You know, sometimes you get some really cool stuff. And while and getting one second, getting back to the whole Granville Hayden and the stone thing. When I found it, I was kind of like, oh, this can't be true. And I got in touch with a professor up there who, if she is still alive, lectures regularly on the murder of Granville Hayden. And she believes that Jim Cullen's skull is still out there sitting in someone's attic, and they don't know. You know, you've got this oddball thing, you don't want to get rid of it, you don't know what to do with it. And the last I spoke to her, about 5 or 6 years ago, she was still looking for it. Lots of time.
My wife has a shirt.
No. Oh, yeah, we were in the cruise ship.
Before we leave tonight, I thank you for allowing our players and your meeting here. I would like to tell you 2 stories of about Abraham Lincoln. It's two of my all-time favorite stories. As you know, Abraham Lincoln always had what he called antidotes, always a story to every situation. In the midst of the American Civil War, you know, England was never on the good side of the United States at that time. So somebody said to Abraham Lincoln, well, what about England? Abraham Lincoln says, sit down, I have a story to tell you. So that person sat down, put along a couple other people that were walking by, because they wanted to hear the story. He said, once upon a time, there was two farmers. One farmer was American, the other farmer was British, for example. And the farmer that was an American, he became very ill. And the other farmer, that was British, they always fought with each other for years upon years. They never talked to each other. They hated each other so badly. Well, the farmer that became very ill believed he was going to die. He told his wife, go to town and get the doctor. And the wife got the doctor, and the doctor came to check the man out. And he says, you are going to die. He says, you're very ill. He said, I would tell you to get the preacher and make all your enemies your friends by confessing to the preacher. Well, the doctor left, and the wife said, the farmer said to the wife, quick, go to town and get the preacher. So the man got the preacher. The man confessed all his sins to the preacher. And the man says to the preacher, can I get into the pearly gates of heaven now? No, said the preacher. You have to make friends with the other farmer across the field. You were bitter enemies for all these years. So you must make him your friend in order to you to get into the gates of heaven. Well, the preacher left, and the man said to his wife, quick, run across the field and get the farmer. You know, the one I hate, go get him. So the woman ran across the field, she brought the farmer over. And he came. And he saw the old farmer in bed, and he was dying. So the farmer came up to the bed of the dying farmer, and he shook hands, and the farmer that was dying sat up, and he says, I want to tell you how sorry I am for all the bad things I said and done to you. Well, the farmer was so touched that he had a tear in his eye. And as he was walking out the door, the farmer sat up more in the bed. And he says to the farmer, I want you to understand one thing. If I get through this, the feud's still on. That's how I feel about England. Another antidote you get is when Jefferson Davis was on the run after Richmond fell. Somebody said that Mr. Lincoln, well, what about Jefferson Davis? Sit down, Mr. Abraham Lincoln. I have a story to tell you. He said, when I was a child, I went over to my friend's house, and my friend had a raccoon on a leash. And that raccoon was trying to get away. And my friend was holding the raccoon. And I said to my friend, I says, Jacob, what are you going to do with the raccoon? He said, my dad's going to kill it and skin it. I said, well, why don't you let it go? He goes, oh, God, no. If I let it go, my dad will beat me. I said, well, why don't you just say it got away and he won't do nothing? That's how I feel about Jefferson Davis. If I let him go, the people will beat me. But if I say he got away, they'll say, that's okay, Abraham. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Suppose we find out who's going to be, you need a ticket.
We gotta get it. I can take two.
This is mine. It's not. Mix these up and mix these up. Now, how about picking the winner?
Now, the basket this evening was donated by a very dear friend of mine, Mary Teresa Connolly. Some of you might know her. She's a local author, wrote a book on the Gravity Railroad. Miss Connolly, I will always call her Miss Connolly because she was my elementary teacher. I was with her this week, and she sent that basket up here. So that's from TC.
And it looks delicious. And the winning number, the last 3 digits, 438. Oh, there we go. I hope you enjoy it. You gonna make a speech?
Yes, I have something to say. We have a gentleman here from,
Old Forge Coal Mine.
Old Forge Coal Mine. He's going to tell us something about searching the coal mine deaths, is it? Coal mine accidents? Just coal mines.
Hi, my name is Carl Rohoski, and I'm the president of the Old Forge Coal Mine website. We started the website last April as a means of preserving the history of coal mining in Old Forge and exploring our heritage. It started off as a small project, and it just blew up like a mushroom growing. To date, we have 499 names of the miners that were killed in Old Forge alone. A lot of that is through research that we got through the Bureau of Mine Inspector reports as our main source. That led up to something else. Now that we got all these reports and everything, most of them on discs, it was sort of a waste just having it at home. So we took one section of the website and created the Anthracite Archives. That's going to list everything we can find about the anthracite coal field, the northern, the middle, and the southern, going all the way down to Pottsville. At present, we have 42 complete Bureau of Mine Inspector reports on the website that you can download, copy, print, do what you want with them. They're for everybody's use. One thing that's in there in the reports is the deaths and injuries list of the miners. For a genealogical standpoint, that gives you a lot of information. Your family, say their name was Thomas, for example, would have his first name, his date that he died, his age when he died, and where he died, at what mine. So that would probably give you a starting point to go. Some of the reports even have the nationality listed on it. In addition to that, it gives a description, sometimes graphic, of how he died. You also have the injury reports, which will list about 5 to 10 times more names than the miners that were killed. And again, same information. It's a good source to look for. I have some flyers here. I'll leave them on the desk if anybody wants it. Our website is www.oldforgecoalmine.com. And on the index on the left-hand side, you just have to click on the Anthracite Archives page, and that'll bring you to that page itself. We have 42 complete listings of the Bureau of Mine reports, 32 partial listings, which we are replacing as we find those years. And in addition to that, we have about 47 Bureau of Mine bulletins that may not have genealogical research in it, but gives you a lot of detailed history about the coal mine in this entire valley, going down to such details as the mine pools, barrier pillars, foundations, conditions of Scranton, of the mines under Scranton, and places like that. We also have listed a historical section where we're listing the history of Lackawanna, Luzerne, and Wyoming Valley written in 1886. A lot of reports like that. All the old histories that were written back then, we're placing them on this site. It's all downloadable. Anybody who wants to go up there and take what you want. It's for everybody's use. We found that we already got it. There's no sense keeping it on my computer. We put it up on our server, which is starlogic.com. We have 2,000 gigabytes of space, and we're setting 1,000 gigabytes of space just for the Anthracite Archives. So it's there. I'll have the flyers here, and I'll be around. If anybody has any questions, my name is Carl. Just feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I have one more person to bring up here. Bernie, would you go up there, please? Bernie DePietro is our member of our board, and she she's our research director. She's doing a great job, and she's our speaker, our last speaker of the evening.
Our last speaker. Some of the things that we're doing right now, we had a board meeting today, and one of the things is Tom Quinn, who's on the board, is preparing a business plan for us, which we're going to work on for the next 3 months. And I think in July, we said we're going to try to complete that, like what we hope to do. One of the things that we'd like to do in the future, Joe may have mentioned it before, is to get 2 digital cameras, and what's the other machine called, Joe?
What's a book
The
reader?
book reader. Scanner. I guess I don't know that much about it, but with all the Catholic churches that are closing, they actually happen to be some of the best, most accurate records, even as opposed to the census. But the problem we have is that we don't have enough money to buy that. We kind of barely make it go on the budget that we have, the money that we get from membership or from the searches. So I guess what we're doing is we're asking for something like, you know, if anybody could donate some money, or you yourself, and we could purchase one of these. Because we're afraid that once the Catholic Church, these churches close, that's it. Those records are going to go someplace in archives that the Catholic Church is going to release them in. Joe has had permission from Jim Early, right? To
Well, he favors the thing
the
that we want
idea.
to do. We got to get the, and I guess if Jim Early agrees, I think the bishop would certainly wholeheartedly endorse it. The problem is, and I guess you got to look for the solution to the problem. There's a lot of retired priests that know how to read these old records. I mean, the way life is today, you cannot digitize longhand or cursive writing. So we need to have somebody sit down with the cursive writing and type it in digitally. So from that, we can have every word searchable. So the long-term goal is that if we can pull this off, that every Catholic ledger since the beginning of the diocese in Scranton will be available to anybody and everybody with every word searchable. Now, the church may want to keep those records in the diocese someplace, but the point is you can call the chancellery or call the diocese office someplace, and with a click of the mouse, they can find whatever your great-great-grandmother was baptized in the church that doesn't exist anymore. They'll have that document down there. And with another click of the mouse, they can copy, they'll have the ability to copy the actual page on the ledger, written in Latin or Polish or whatever it might be, plus the digital readout written in English so you can understand it. A lot of times people get the transcriptions from different priests, and in my particular case, I had one when my grandfather died before he was born. I mean, because of the date when they transcribed the record. It's nice to have the original document showing, written in longhand, you know, in Latin, what somebody's name was, who the parents were, who the godparents were, and the date of the baptism, who the priest was, and all that other stuff. So it's even better to have when you can read in English. So that's our goal, and with the help of the bishop and the diocese and maybe some of the retired priests, we're going to make this thing happen. And
Again, it all depends on like how much money we could raise to buy these cameras. And I don't know, you had a rough estimate of the cost.
$8,000.
About $8,000 to do that, you know.
That's just for the camera. Everything else we have to do at home. But what we do when we complete a church, we've done this in the past, we give, like we did St. Mary's in Dixon City, we'll give the church, in those cases, we people had microfilm. We give them a roll of microfilm, and then we have a roll of microfilm, and then when we finally get all that microfilm interpreted, then we give them a 3-ring binder with everything in there written down, so the girl at St. Mary's can look it up and say, yes, they were baptized here on such and such a date. But now with the digital age, I'll have it come right out of the computer. I mean, it's
As it stands right now, if any of you have tried to contact some of the churches, you have some very cooperative parishes and some that, no, you can't find it. I mean, they don't even open a book and they tell you, no, we can't find it. If we were hoping that we'd be able to do something to make it, all those records accessible. As Joe said, we do have some of the tapes like St. Mary's and Dixon baptisms. That's in the original Latin. I mean, some of them are easy to translate. It's, you know, if the whole idea is if we had our hands on the original copy. that we could look at it and we could do it that way. So I guess we're making a plea for some additional money, or, you know, if you know of any place, I think that could work for somebody, that they could make a matching, like a matching donation, or, you know, something like that. It would be, certainly be a big help in accomplishing what we hope to within the next year, because these churches, I think they're giving them till July 2009 or something, some of them.
But it's a glorious opportunity for our society to really help people.
We haven't been able to get a grant so far for this equipment. We've tried, but so far nothing has.
We know how to do genealogy, we don't know how to write grants.
Grant writing is a lot more. You think if you just send in and say, you know, this is what we want, this is what we want to do. It's not that easy. I mean, they reject them for the oddest reasons, like it's the terminology, it's the language. I mean, there are people that are trained in grant writing, and evidently we're not, because, you know, we just haven't been able to get the grants for that kind of stuff, which certainly we're going to keep working on it, but we'll keep working on it. Hopefully, we'll, you know, find something to do it. But any help is greatly appreciated.
Thank you all very much.